The Roman road lies pale under the moon, a ribbon of stone and dust that holds the day's heat a little longer. Somewhere ahead, a town sleeps behind low walls. Somewhere behind, a lamp is being pinched out. And between those two quiet places, a small group moves forward at an unhurried pace, as if the night itself is guiding them. So before you fully relax, take a moment to like and subscribe. Only if you truly enjoy this. Leave a comment with your location and time. I love seeing where everyone is listening from. Now, dim the lights, maybe let a fan hum softly, and let's begin tonight's journey. The decree had gone out, Luke says in 2:15, and the roads began to carry more footsteps than usual. Names were being counted, families were being gathered into lists, and in Nazareth, in the gentle hills of Galilee, Joseph prepared for a journey he did not ask for, with Mary beside him, carrying a quiet miracle in her body. They did not race the dawn. They simply set out, because there was a time to go, and because sometimes faithfulness looks like one more step and then another. You can picture the first moments on the road, a clay lamp's last glow fading in a doorway, the hush of packed bundles, the soft creak of straps tightened around a satchel. Bread is wrapped in cloth. A few olives are tucked away. Water skins are checked with the calm care of people who know the road is long. Mary rides when she needs to. When she walks with a measured breath, letting the rhythm of the journey settle her thoughts. Joseph stays close, watching the ground, watching the horizon, listening for anything that might trouble the night. There is no drama in his attention, only steady love, the kind that keeps a small world safe. At times they pass a milestone, a carved stone marking distance, like a gentle reminder that progress is real, even when it feels slow. An owl calls from a low tree. A dog barks once in a far-off yard and then settles again. The world does not demand constant noise. The world knows how to rest. Maybe you, listening now, have carried a day that felt too full. Maybe you did what you could, and still it felt like the list never ended. In a night like this, it can help to remember that God's story often moves at walking speed. Not because it is weak, but because it is sure. The landscape changes in quiet ways. Hills soften into open stretches. A grove of olives appears like dark lace against the sky. A well sits beside a path. Its stones cool from countless hands. They pause there, not to worry, but to receive. Water tastes simple and clean in the night, and the simple things can be enough. Other travelers pass, some with lanterns, some with only starlight and memory guiding their feet. Greetings stay brief, yet even strangers share a kind of companionship on a road. You see another small light and feel less alone. You hear footsteps behind you and know the night holds more than one heartbeat. When they rest, it is in a sheltered spot beside the way, where the air smells of dust and old wood. A breeze slips through the open side and cools the skin. Joseph adjusts Mary's cloak, not with ceremony, but with tenderness. She rests her hand on her belly for a moment, as if to steady herself, as if to offer comfort to the child she carries. The road does not ask them to understand everything. It only asks them to keep going. If you stood a little distance away, you might notice how ordinary it all looks. A man, a woman, a donkey, a few belongings. The kind of scene that could pass without anyone remembering it. And yet, inside that plainness, something holy is moving through the world. This is one of the gentle mysteries Luke gives you. The Savior does not arrive with the noise of triumph. He arrives among travelers through the quiet routine of a census and a long walk. There is comfort in that, because it means your own ordinary life, your errands, your work, your small responsibilities, can also be a place where God is near. Not only in bright moments, not only when you feel strong, even when you're tired, especially when you are tired. The sky stretches wide, dark blue with a few steady stars. The stones underfoot keep their shape, firm and reliable. The donkey's steps keep time like a soft, patient metronome. Steady, steady, steady. Joseph's thoughts may wander to questions he cannot answer: where they will stay, whether there will be room, how he will care for Mary when the time comes. But he does not have to solve the whole future tonight. He only has to be faithful in this moment. He only has to take the next step. And you can borrow that gentleness for yourself. You may not have to replay every conversation from today. You may not have to build tomorrow in your mind before you sleep. You can let tomorrow wait at the edge of the road, while tonight becomes a small shelter for your heart. There are sounds that belong to travel at night. The faint click of a stone shifting, the whisper of fabric, the low murmur of a distant stream. And then there are the larger silences, the ones that wrap around you like a blanket. Those silences are not empty. They are filled with breath, with presence, with a quiet knowledge that you are held. In time, they will reach Bethlehem. In time, the story will open into scenes the world remembers. But for now, let it remain simple. A Roman road, a tired couple, and the steady love of God moving beside them. As you imagine their pace slowing in the cool air, you can let your own pace slow too. Your shoulders can loosen as if a strap has been set down. Your jaw can soften. Your breathing can lengthen, easy and unforced, like a traveler finally sensing rest ahead. Beyond the town's last sleeping house, the hillside holds its own kind of quiet. The grass is short and silvered with dew. Stones keep their warmth beneath the cool air. And the sheep, small shapes clustered in the dark, breathe in soft, steady waves that sound almost like the tide. A few shepherds remain awake, not because they are anxious, but because this is simply what the night requires. Luke tells it in 2:8-14. Shepherds were out in the fields, keeping watch over their flock. Their work is humble and repetitive. They know the feel of rope in the hand, the weight of a staff, the way a lamb's bleat changes when it is hungry versus when it is afraid. A fire sits low in a ring of stones. Its light is gentle, more ember than blaze, and it paints warm edges on rough cloaks and tired hands. One man breaks a piece of bread and shares it without fuss. Another checks the flock with a slow turn of the head, listening more than looking. The air smells faintly of smoke and sheep's wool, and in the distance, the town's lights are only a few patient dots. There's nothing grand here. No marble floors, no bright banners. Just ordinary people, guarding ordinary animals under an ordinary sky. And maybe that is why this scene feels so safe. On nights like this, even the smallest sounds feel clear. A pebble shifting under a sandal, the faint rustle of a cloak, the soft exhale of a lamb pressed close to its mother. The shepherds do not fight the silence. They live inside it. They let it settle them, the way a still room can settle you when the day finally ends. Then, in a moment that does not build slowly, everything changes, yet not in a way that shatters peace. It arrives like light does, suddenly and still. Luke says the glory of the Lord shone around them. The hillside is no longer only moonlit. A brightness settles over the field, clear and clean, as if the air itself has been washed. The shepherds do what any human heart might do. They tremble, not because they are being harmed, but because they are surprised by holiness. And the messenger speaks with tenderness. "Do not be afraid," Luke says. The words do not sound like a command. They sound like a hand held out in the dark. Do not be afraid, not because you are strong, but because God is near. The news is simple and astonishing. A Savior has been born, not in a palace, not behind guarded gates. In a nearby town, wrapped like any other newborn, laid in a manger. A sign so plain that even the tired and overlooked can recognize it. As the shepherds take this in, you can imagine their faces lit by that steady radiance, wide-eyed, quiet. They do not need to prove themselves worthy of the message. They are simply receiving it, like rain received by dry ground. And then the sky seems to open wider than it had before. Luke describes a multitude of heavenly voices praising God and saying peace has come, peace on earth, goodwill toward people. The song is not sharp. It does not startle the flock into panic. It is more like a covering, like warmth spreading across cold fingers, like a soft harmony that makes the night feel held. Peace, not the kind that pretends nothing hurts, not the kind that demands you feel cheerful. A deeper peace, one that can exist even while the world is still imperfect, even while hearts are still tired. If you have been carrying worries you cannot fix tonight, you can let this hillside teach you something gentle. You can be held without having everything solved. Your thoughts may still be there, but they do not have to be in charge. Peace can sit beside you, quiet and real. And you can notice, too, how the message comes to people who did not climb for it. They were simply faithful in small work, and heaven found them there. In the same way, rest can come to you without being earned by perfect performance. You can receive it as a gift. The shepherds stand very still. One grips his staff out of habit, then loosens his hand when he realizes there is no danger. Another looks toward Bethlehem as if he can already feel the pull of that message. Yet for a breath, they remain in place, letting the song pass through them like wind through tall grass. And then, as suddenly as it arrived, the brightness lifts. The hillside returns to moonlight. The fire is still there, small and faithful. The sheep are still breathing, untroubled. The night has not been ruined by the miracle. It has been deepened by it. The shepherds look at one another, and their voices find each other again, soft, amazed, careful. No one makes a speech. No one tries to control the moment. They simply agree to go and see. Because sometimes the most honest response to good news is a simple yes. You may notice something comforting about the way Luke tells it. God does not bypass the weary. He does not reserve his nearness for the polished and important. He speaks first to people who smell like smoke and field grass, whose hands are rough, whose eyes are used to darkness. And that can steady you too. If you feel unremarkable, if you feel like you are simply making it through another day, you are not outside God's attention. You can be exactly where you are, with your ordinary life, and still be met with peace. The fire lowers another inch. A shepherd pulls his cloak closer and takes one last look at the flock, as if to memorize how quiet this moment is. Then he turns his face toward the town, toward a small room where a child has entered the world with no fanfare, only grace. As your own evening continues, you can let that angelic message rest in the background of your thoughts, like a gentle hum. Do not be afraid. Peace is given. Peace can be received. And without any rush, your breathing can slow. The imagined hillside grows dimmer, softer at the edges, as if the scene itself is settling into sleep. The fire becomes a warm blur. The sheep become quiet shadows, and the song, though it has faded, leaves behind a calm that lingers, steady and kind, as you drift toward rest. Bethlehem does not sleep deeply tonight. It rests in small patches, behind shutters, under woven blankets. Yet the town is fuller than usual, and the fullness carries its own quiet noise. Footsteps echo in narrow lanes. A door opens, then closes with care. The shepherds come down from the hills with a quickness that still tries to stay gentle. Luke says in 2:15-20 that they went to see what had been made known to them. They move through the outskirts where the air smells of dust and last night's fire. Then into streets that smell of bread, olive oil, and many bodies sharing the same space. Bethlehem's lanes are tight, lined with stone that holds the day's warmth and returns it slowly. In the dim light, it is easy to take a wrong turn. The shepherds pause at corners, listening, searching for a sign that sounds almost too plain to be true. A newborn, wrapped in cloth, laid in a manger. They pass a doorway where a family is crowded together, speaking in murmurs. They pass another where an older man sits rubbing tired knees as if the census has settled into his bones. The town is full of small human stories, all of them pressed close. It can feel like that inside you sometimes. A day packed with moments, a mind packed with thoughts, so that even when the lights go out, the inside of you still feels crowded. In a town like Bethlehem tonight, quiet seems hard to find, until you learn it can be hidden. The shepherds find the place not by grandeur, but by a steadier kind of light. Not bright, only faithful. A warmth that does not spill into the street like a celebration, but stays gathered close, as if protecting something fragile. They step nearer, and the sounds shift. Less street, more hush. A rustle of straw, the slow breathing of animals that have learned the peace of the night. A small space used for shelter, for storage, for whatever must be kept safe. Inside, Mary is there, and Joseph, and the child. Luke tells it simply, as if simplicity is part of the truth. The baby is wrapped the way any careful parent would wrap him, and he rests where the animals would feed. Not because he's unwanted, but because the world made no room, and love made a room anyway. Joseph stands with a quiet watchfulness that does not demand attention. He sees the shepherds at the threshold and does not drive them away. He reads their faces, wonder, disbelief, joy held carefully, and he lets them come near. Mary sits close, her body still carrying the after-tremble of birth. Her hands are plain hands, yet there is a stillness around her, as if she is listening to the room as much as she is looking at the child. When she shifts, it is slow, the way you move when you do not want to wake someone who is finally resting. A small lamp burns low, barely more than a golden bead of flame. It does not flood the space, it simply makes edges visible. Cloth, wood grain, the curve of a sleeping cheek. Joseph has placed things within reach. Water, a folded cloth, a corner cleared for sitting. It is the quiet skill of care, making order inside a world that feels crowded. The baby's breathing is the smallest rhythm here, and it feels like the center of everything. The shepherds do not rush forward. They lower themselves until their height is no longer a barrier. Men of open hills and night winds, used to being overlooked, now received without suspicion. They tell what they heard, not as a performance, but as something that has to be shared because it is too bright to keep inside. A messenger, a word of peace, the promise that what is happening here matters. Their voices stay low, the way voices naturally soften near a sleeping child. Mary listens, and Luke says she treasured these things and pondered them in her heart. 2:19. She does not force meaning out of every detail. She gathers each word gently, as if storing warmth for colder nights ahead. There is comfort in that kind of pondering. You do not have to understand everything tonight. You can hold what you can and leave the rest with God. Even in a season when you feel counted by deadlines and measured by effort, you are known more tenderly than any list could manage. Outside, Bethlehem remains crowded, but inside this small shelter, there is space. Not much space of straw and wood, but space in the sense that matters. Room to breathe, room to be seen, room to rest without performing. The manger is an ordinary object, meant for feed, yet tonight it becomes a cradle, and the ordinary is honored. God does not wait for perfect settings. He enters wherever humble love makes an opening. If your own life feels imperfect, unfinished chores, messy corners, plans that did not hold, this scene does not shame you. It meets you. It whispers that holiness can arrive in rooms that are not polished. Peace can settle where you thought only noise could live. The shepherds linger only as long as is kind. They look once more at the child, as if their eyes want to memorize the reality of him. Then they rise and step back into the lane. Luke says they returned, glorifying and praising God. 2:20. Their joy is not loud. It is steady, like a warm ember cupped from the wind. Stone walls receive them again in distant murmurs and the long night. Yet something in them has changed. They walk like people who have found a hidden room of calm in the middle of a crowded world. And you too can carry that kind of calm, not by forcing silence, but by letting a small, steady light remain within you. As Bethlehem fades in your imagination, let that manger's quiet warmth stay near, gentle and close. Your breathing can become the softest sound around you. The day can loosen its grip, and in the hush, you can rest as if there is room for you here. Real room, made by love. The wilderness has its own hush, different from the hush of a town. In the village, quiet is made by doors closing and lamps dimming. Here, quiet is simply the way the land already is, wide, open, and honest. The sky feels larger, the air feels cleaner, and the path, worn by many feet, runs alongside a river that keeps moving even when everything else seems still. Luke tells in 3:16 that a word from God came to John in the wilderness, not in a court, not in a hall lined with stone and speeches, but out here, where reeds bend, where sand gathers at the river's edge, where the wind can speak without being interrupted. You can imagine the scene at first light. The horizon pales from deep blue to soft gray. A thin mist clings to the Jordan. The water carries small ripples that catch the early glow like quiet silver. Birds stir in the reeds, and their calls are brief, as if they too are keeping the morning gentle. People arrive in simple groups. Some come from nearby villages. Some have traveled longer, following word of mouth along roads and market lanes, then turning off into this open land. They do not come because it is comfortable. They come because something in them is tired of carrying the same weight, the same worry, the same unspoken guilt, the same restlessness that won't let the heart settle. John stands near the water, a steady figure against the wide space. His clothing is plain and rough, made for the outdoors, and his face looks like someone who has spent time with silence. Yet the way he speaks is not meant to bruise. It is meant to clear. He calls people to repentance, yes. But repentance here is not humiliation. It is turning. It is choosing a different direction when the old one has led only to dryness. If your mind has been circling the same thoughts, what you should have done, what you failed to do, what you fear might happen, this turning can sound like mercy, not a demand to be perfect, a permission to stop walking in circles. John's voice moves over the gathered people and into the morning air. It is firm, but it is also strangely comforting because it tells the truth. And the truth can be restful when you are tired of pretending you are fine. Luke describes it with the language of old promises. Prepare the way of the Lord, make his path straight. Valleys lifted, mountains brought low, crooked made straight, rough places smoothed. 3, 4, 6. It sounds like road work, the kind that makes travel safer for those who are weary. You can picture workers out on a route before a king's visit, clearing loose stones, filling deep ruts, cutting back thorny brush, leveling what might trip a traveler in the dark. John borrows that image and turns it inward. The work is not only on the land, it is in the heart, and it is gentle work, done one small choice at a time. A man steps into the river and lets the water close around his ankles, then his knees. The current presses softly against him. He breathes in, and his shoulders drop as if they have been holding a burden for years. Another person follows, then another, each one entering the water as if entering a quiet beginning. John baptizes them, and the water is cool, clear, and ordinary. Yet it feels like a clean page. It feels like a chance to start again without the heavy dragging of yesterday. You might notice how simple the setting is. No ornate altar, no fine garments, no staged music. Just water, sky, voice, and willing hearts. There is something deeply calming about simplicity. It leaves room for breath. It leaves room for truth. Some stand at the edge, listening before they decide. You can almost see them. Hands folded, eyes lowered, thinking. Turning does not always happen instantly. Sometimes it starts with an honest pause. Sometimes it begins with admitting, quietly, that your current way of living has left you exhausted. If you are listening tonight with that same exhaustion, this wilderness scene offers a soft kind of hope. God does not wait for you to be polished before he comes near. He meets people out on open ground, where there is space to be real. The river keeps moving. Wind moves through reeds like a slow exhale. The sun climbs a little higher, and the light grows warmer, touching faces, touching the water, touching the path. John speaks again about straight paths, and you can let that image settle into you like warm tea. A straight path does not mean an easy life. It means less stumbling in the dark. It means fewer hidden pits of fear. It means fewer sharp turns made by panic. Maybe, for you, a straight path tonight looks like one small release. Releasing the need to replay an argument. Releasing the urge to check one more thing. Releasing the pressure to solve next week before you sleep. The wilderness does not rush anyone. The river does not argue. It simply offers itself again and again, moving forward with quiet patience. And then, as Luke's story continues elsewhere, crowds will grow and questions will rise. But here, In this moment by the Jordan, let the scene remain calm. Let it be about a God who speaks in open places and about a heart that is allowed to turn toward rest. When the gathered people begin to drift back toward their villages, their steps seem slower, steadier, not because every problem is gone, but because something inside has been aligned. They are walking with less clutter. They are walking with a clearer direction. You can take that with you into your own night. Imagine the path beside the river, smoothing out under the morning sun. Imagine the rough places becoming gentle under careful hands. And as you lie where you are, let your breathing become the straight road for your thoughts. One breath in, one breath out, simple and faithful. Let your forehead soften. Let your shoulders sink into the support beneath you. And if any worry rises, you can picture it like a loose stone being set aside, so the way ahead stays quiet and safe. Nazareth sits tucked into its hills like a small thought held close. The roads that lead to it are narrower than the Roman routes, more dust than stone, more footpaths than milestones. By the time you arrive in your imagination, the sun has begun to lower, and the light is gentle, honeyed, touching the edges of rooftops and the curves of olive branches. Luke tells in 4:16-22 that Jesus came to Nazareth, where he had been brought up. And on the Sabbath, he went into the synagogue, as was his custom. It is one of those simple sentences that feels like a warm bowl set on the table. Steady, familiar, unforced. The synagogue is not grand. It is a gathering space, plain and practical, with stone walls that hold coolness even on warm days. Lamps are ready for evening. Scrolls are kept with care, rolled and tied, treated with the quiet respect of people who know words can hold life. You can picture the room filling slowly. Sandals scuff softly on the floor. A child leans into a mother's side, half listening, half drifting. Older men settle into places they have sat many times before. A hush forms, not by command, but by shared habit, like the way a house naturally quiets when everyone knows it is time to rest. Jesus stands when it is his turn to read. There's no performance in him, no eager reach for attention. Luke's telling is calm, almost understated, and that calm itself feels like part of the gift. The scroll of Isaiah is handed to him. He unrolls it with care, the way you might open a treasured letter. The sound of parchment is soft, almost like fabric moving. The room leans inward, not with excitement, but with that steady curiosity people have when something familiar is about to be spoken again. And then he reads words that land gently and deeply. Good news for the poor, release for the captive, sight for the blind, freedom for the oppressed. Luke records it in 4:18-19. It is not a harsh message. It is not a complicated argument. It is relief. It is breath. In that moment, you can imagine how many hearts in that room are tired. Tired from work that never ends. Tired from family conflicts that keep repeating. Tired from living under systems they cannot change. Tired from carrying quiet shame, quiet grief, quiet fear. Jesus reads as if he knows that tiredness, as if he has come specifically to speak into it. He rolls the scroll back up. He returns it. He sits. And the room holds its breath in a different way now, the way you hold your breath when you sense something important is near. Luke says the eyes of all in the synagogue were fixed on him, 4:20. Not because he is trying to draw them, because there is a steadiness in him that draws people the way warmth draws cold hands. Then he speaks a sentence that is both simple and astonishing. Today this scripture has been fulfilled in your hearing. 4:21. Today, not someday far away when you have earned it. Not once you have fixed yourself. Today, as you are, listening with your tired heart. There is something profoundly comforting about that word, today, because it brings God's care into the present moment, not into a future version of you, into you now. Nazareth is a small town. People know each other's stories. They know who has money and who has none. They know whose child is sick, whose marriage is strained, whose harvest failed. They know Jesus' family, his work, his ordinary years. And that familiarity, instead of dulling the moment, makes the message feel closer. If God's comfort can be spoken in a small synagogue in a small town, it can be spoken into your small room tonight. It does not need a special stage. It needs only your listening. Luke says the people marveled at the gracious words that came from his mouth. 4:22. Gracious, not sharp, not heavy. Words that do not push your shoulders tighter, but make them loosen as if someone has finally told you the truth with kindness. You can imagine those words moving through the room like warm lamplight, touching faces, softening eyes, settling into places that have been tense for too long. You can imagine someone who came in exhausted leaving with a quieter step. Not because every problem vanished, but because hope was placed gently into their hands. And if your own mind has been loud, this scene invites a quieter posture. It invites you to let a gracious voice be louder than your worries. Not by forcing your worries away, but by letting something better sit beside them. Notice the rhythm. Jesus reads, he sits. He speaks one sentence. The room listens. There is a slowness here, a Sabbath slowness, as if God himself is saying, you do not have to hurry tonight. The synagogue's stone walls hold the coolness. A lamp flickers, small and steady. Dust motes drift in a sunbeam like slow snowfall. Outside, the village settles into evening. Pots being set down, doors being closed, footsteps fading. Inside, the message remains. Release, freedom, good news today. For you listening now, today may look like one quiet act of trust. Trusting that you can stop holding everything so tightly. Trusting that God is not measuring your worth by your productivity. Trusting that even if you feel low, you are still seen. As Nazareth dims in your imagination, keep the feeling of that room. The steady hush, the gracious words, the gentle light. Let your breathing match that Sabbath pace. Unhurried, simple, safe. Let your eyelids grow heavier if they want to. Let your body settle as if you too are sitting in a place where no one demands anything from you, where comfort is offered freely. And as the last bit of daylight fades from the village hills, you can rest with a quiet confidence that the same God who spoke today in Nazareth can speak peace over you tonight, softly and surely. The lake is calm in the early hours, before the day learns how to speak. A thin veil of mist hovers above the water, softening the far shore until it looks like a faint line of gray. Near the edge, stones are damp with night air, and reeds lean close, barely moving. Luke tells in 5:1-11 that a crowd once pressed in near this water to hear Jesus. But before the crowd becomes the center, there is a quieter picture. Fishermen finishing a long night. Their hands smell of rope and lake water. Their shoulders carry the familiar ache of pulling nets, sorting, mending, trying again. Simon stands near his boat with the focused tiredness of someone completing what must be completed. Nets lie across the shore, pale and tangled in places, and he works them loose with practiced patience. He checks each cord for fray, draws broken strands together, and ties them back into strength. The boat beside him is plain, wood darkened by water, edges worn smooth by years of touch. A few other fishermen rinse their nets and lift them to drain, letting thin threads of water fall back into the lake. The morning stays steady and unshowy, and steadiness has its own comfort. The night's fishing did not go as hoped. You can imagine the hours behind Simon's eyes, the boat gliding over dark water, the quiet splash of a net thrown wide, the pause, the pull, and then the same emptiness returning to his hands. Not tragedy, just that dull ache of effort without reward. If you have ever poured yourself into something and watched it come up light, this shore understands you. Jesus arrives, and people gather along the waterline. Voices layer into a low murmur. Sandals scrape stone. The air holds the clean scent of morning, mixed with wet wood and the faint salt of sweat from night labor. Jesus looks toward the boats, and Simon's becomes a small refuge from the press of bodies. He steps into it and asks Simon to push out a little from the land. The boat rocks gently as it leaves the shore, and the water takes it without resistance, lifting and holding it as if it belongs there. From that little distance, Jesus teaches. He sits in the boat as if the lake itself is a quiet platform, and his voice carries across the surface in a calm way that does not fight the morning. People listen with faces turned toward him, eyes softened by the simple hope of being spoken to with kindness. Simon remains close enough to hear everything, close enough to feel the weight of his tiredness, and yet surrounded by a hush that makes room for something new. When Jesus finishes speaking, he turns to Simon and says to put out into the deep and let down the nets. It brushes against a fisherman's instincts because Simon knows the lake and the hours that usually work. Luke shows Simon's honesty and his openness in one breath. They have worked all night and caught nothing, but at Jesus' word, he will try again. It is not loud faith. It is tired faith that still says yes. The boat moves farther out. The shoreline recedes. The water darkens slightly where it deepens, and the oars make soft, repeating sounds. Simon's hands return to familiar motions. The nets wait, the careful cast, the waiting. For a moment, it feels like the night again. Quiet, uncertain, unfinished. Then the net tightens in a way it has not tightened all night. A fullness spreads through the rope and into his arms. He pulls, and the line bites his palm. He signals to partners nearby, and another boat slides close. Fish flash under the surface like quick silver, and the nets strain with a kind of abundance that feels almost unreal after emptiness. Luke says the boats begin to sink. There is awe in it, but not chaos. More like the hush you feel when you realize you have been seen. The men work carefully, passing weight from hand to hand, keeping balance, keeping the catch from spilling back into the lake. Water taps the hull in gentle, steady beats. Simon feels small in the face of such holiness and speaks out of that smallness. Jesus answers with steadiness. Do not be afraid. The words do not scold, they settle. Then comes the new invitation. His life will gather people into hope, not only gather fish into boats. James and John, Simon's partners, are there too. Their hands wet, their eyes wide with quiet wonder. Together they bring the boats to shore. The catch still shines in the nets, proof of what happened. Yet Luke says they leave everything and follow. It does not mean they despise their old life. It means something greater has called them, and the call feels steady enough to trust. The story moves without hurry. A morning, a boat, a word, and a turning of the heart. For you, listening at the end of a long day, this lake shore offers a gentle thought. Your worth is not measured by what you caught today. Your effort matters even when the outcome was thin. And if you feel empty, you may still be close to a quiet turning point, where grace meets routine and gives it new meaning. The lake returns to stillness after the commotion. The crowd thins. The boats settle into the sand with soft, final sounds. Sunlight warms the damp wood, and the edge of the nets begins to dry. In your mind, the scene grows quieter again. Mist lifting, ripples smoothing out, voices fading into distance. The last image is not of strain, but of a calm shoreline and a steady walk along it. And as that calm lingers, your thoughts can loosen their grip, one by one, the way a net relaxes when it is finally set down. The night around you is allowed to be plain and safe, and your body's allowed to grow heavy with rest, like a boat that no longer has to fight the water, only to be held by it. The road narrows as it approaches the edge of town, and with it comes the kind of busyness that still feels contained. A donkey cart creaks past. A woman carries a clay jar against her hip, steady as if she has done it 1,000 times. The air holds the mingled scent of sun-warmed stone, dried fish from earlier markets, and something faintly sweet, figs perhaps, or dates laid out to soften. Luke tells in 5:27-32 that Jesus saw a tax collector named Levi sitting at the tax booth. It is an ordinary sentence on the surface, but it opens into a scene many people would rather avoid. The tax booth sits close to the road like a small checkpoint in daily life. It is where Roman authority becomes personal, where the weight of empire touches a person's purse and patience. The booth itself is simple: a table, a stool, a box for coins. Yet the atmosphere around it feels heavier than the wood and stone should allow. Levi sits there with a practiced stillness. His hands know numbers, his eyes know faces. He has learned how to remain calm while people tighten their mouths and avert their gaze. Coins clink into his box, small sounds that can carry large resentment. Some townspeople hurry past, wanting to be done with the exchange as quickly as possible. Others pause longer than they must, as if the booth is an unavoidable wall in the middle of their day. A few mutter complaints under their breath. Levi hears it all. He has heard it for a long time. There is loneliness in that kind of work. Not because Levi is innocent of the system, but because being disliked can harden into a constant ache. Even if he has money, he may not have peace. Even if he has security, he may not have warmth. And then Jesus comes along the road and does something simple. He sees Levi. Not the booth, not the coins, not the label. Levi. In a world that often looks through people, this kind of seeing is rare. Luke does not say Jesus stared dramatically or made a spectacle. He simply looked at him and spoke two words that are both invitation and trust. Follow me. Levi does not negotiate. He does not ask for time. Luke says he left everything, rose, and followed. Rising is a small action, but in this moment it is like stepping out of a cramped room into open air. The stool stays behind. The box of coins stays behind. The old identity, built by habit and necessity, begins to loosen. Levi leads Jesus to his house, and the scene shifts from public tension to the intimacy of a table. In that culture, a meal is not just food. It is belonging. It is peace offered in the language everyone understands. Bread broken, oil poured, cups passed, conversation shared in the simple warmth of being near. Levi's house fills with guests, tax collectors and others, Luke says, people whose names carry shadows in polite company. People used to being kept at arm's length. The room is not fancy, but it is alive with a different kind of light than the tax booth ever held. Clay lamps glow against walls that have seen ordinary evenings. Platters are set down, flatbread warm from a small oven, olives glistening in oil, perhaps lentils steaming softly, perhaps fish seasoned simply. Hands reach for food and laughter rises, careful at first, then more natural, as if people are remembering what it feels like to be human together. If you have ever felt like an outsider, like your mistakes or your reputation put you beyond welcome, this table is a quiet surprise. Jesus does not hover at the doorway, deciding who deserves him. He sits, he eats, he listens. He allows the room to be a room where people can breathe. Of course, not everyone is comfortable with that. Luke notes the murmuring of the Pharisees and their scribes. Why eat and drink with tax collectors and sinners? The question comes from a desire to keep life neatly sorted, to keep the clean separate from the unclean, to keep comfort protected. Jesus answers with calm clarity. He compares himself to a physician. Those who are well do not need a doctor, but those who are sick. He has come to call not the righteous, but sinners to repentance. 5:31-32. The words are direct, yet they are not cruel. They are a doorway. If you know you need help, you are not disqualified. You are exactly the kind of person grace seeks. And there is relief in that. Because tired hearts often carry two burdens, the burden of the day and the burden of self-judgment. This story loosens the second one. It suggests that being imperfect is not the end of your story. Being imperfect may be the very place where God begins. Levi, once hunched over coins at the road's edge, now sits upright at his own table, watching Jesus speak with people who have rarely been spoken to with gentleness. In his eyes, there may be a quiet astonishment, not only that he was invited, but that the invitation is real. There is a comfort reflection here that can settle softly into you. You may not be defined by your worst label. You may be seen more deeply than the name you fear people whisper. And if you have carried guilt like a heavy pouch on your shoulder, it can be set down, not in denial, but in trust that mercy is stronger than shame. The meal continues. Someone refills a cup. Someone tears bread and passes it across the table. The lamp flame flickers, steady and warm. Outside, the town's road keeps moving. Feet, carts, distant voices. But inside, there is a pocket of peace. And that is what the story offers you tonight. A pocket of peace in the middle of the road. As you imagine the room dimming toward evening, let your own inner room dim too. Let the day's sharp edges soften. Let the sense of being evaluated fall away. You do not have to earn a seat at this kind of table by being flawless. You can simply be here, breathing, receiving. Your breath can slow as if you are finally sitting down. Your shoulders can drop as if the heavy pouch has been set aside. And in the warmth of this quiet, shared meal, you can let rest find you the way Jesus found Levi. Simply, kindly, without hesitation. A house near the village lane glows with evening lamp light. making stone look softer and shadows less sharp. Guests move in and out with the quiet confidence of those invited to a good table. Inside, cups are set down, bread is broken, and conversation stays low, like a blanket laid carefully over the day. Luke tells in 7:36-50 that a Pharisee asked Jesus to eat with him. The home is orderly and careful. A basin waits near the entrance with water that catches the lamp glow. A towel hangs nearby. Cushions ring a low table, and bowls of herbs and oils sit within easy reach. Everything feels proper, as if peace can be kept by keeping life neatly arranged. Jesus enters without hurry and takes the place offered. Faces watch him with measuring eyes. Yet the meal begins like any other. Hands reaching, cups filling, polite words traded across the room. A breeze slips through the doorway and carries in the faint scent of olive leaves, then drifts away again. Then a woman steps in, quietly, through the open part of the home where neighbors can pass. Luke says she was known in the city for her sin. The story does not parade her past. It only lets you feel what the room already knows. Her name has become a label, and labels tend to stick like dust. She pauses at the edge, as if the threshold itself is heavy. You can imagine the courage it takes to enter a room where people have already decided what you are. Yet she keeps moving, not toward the Pharisee, not toward the safest corner, but toward Jesus. In her hands is an alabaster jar, sealed, smooth, and small. It is the kind of jar someone guards carefully, because what is inside is costly. She comes close to Jesus as he reclines at the table, feet stretched behind, sandals set aside, and the defenses she has carried seem to loosen all at once. Tears fall. She kneels and washes his feet with them, then dries them with her hair, not for show, but because she has nothing else in reach. The room stills. A few guests look away. Others stare, uncomfortable with a mercy that has no tidy edges. The lamp flame wavers once, and then steadies, as if even the light has learned to be gentle. She opens the jar, and perfume fills the air. Warm, deep, lingering. It settles into the room and makes pretense difficult. This moment will not be ignored. The scent clings to cloth and skin, and it will follow everyone home. A quiet reminder that something real happened here. The Pharisee watches, and Luke lets you hear his thought. If Jesus were a prophet, he would know what kind of woman this is. The judgment is quiet, but it cuts cleanly, as if distance could keep him safe. It is the old instinct to protect oneself by drawing a line and deciding who belongs on which side. Jesus answers without sharpness. He tells a small story, simple enough to fit on a table. Two people owed a lender money, one much and one little. Neither could repay, and the lender forgave both. Which one will love more? The Pharisee answers cautiously that the one forgiven more will love more. Jesus agrees, and then he holds up a gentle mirror. He speaks of welcome withheld and welcome given. No water for his feet, no greeting kiss, no oil. Small courtesies that say, "You are safe here." Yet this woman has not stopped washing, not stopped honoring, not stopped offering what she has. Her love is not polished, but it is honest. Jesus does not say her love purchased forgiveness like a market trade. He reveals her love as the sign of a heart finally receiving mercy. In other words, forgiveness has opened the door, and love has rushed through it like clean air. Then he speaks words that land like fresh water on tired skin. Her sins are forgiven. The guests whisper, startled by the authority of it. Who is this who forgives? But Jesus does not chase their approval. He turns to the woman and gives her what she came for. Your faith has saved you. Go in peace. Peace, not the thin peace of being tolerated. A fuller peace, where a person can stop fighting themselves in the dark. If you have ever carried a private list of wrong turns, this scene meets you gently. You may know the feeling of replaying a mistake until it feels larger than you. You may know the ache of wondering if you will always be that person. In Jesus' presence, a person is more than their label. Forgiveness is not a rumor. It is a gift that can be spoken aloud, steady and real. And there is a quiet caution here too. A life that stays proper can still keep love at arm's length. It is possible to do what looks right and still remain closed. Tonight, you may not need perfect words. You can simply let your heart open a little, even if it opens with trembling. The woman rises. The perfume remains, but the heaviness does not. She leaves the house without spectacle, stepping back into the same night air, yet carrying herself as if her shoulders finally remember how to rest. The village lane is cool now. A dog turns in place and settles. A distant lamp goes out. The world keeps its ordinary rhythm, but she is no longer trapped inside her old story. Inside, lamps continue to flicker. The meal continues in some form. But the room has been softened by mercy, and a new kind of quiet has been placed on the table. Quiet that does not come from control, but from grace. As the scene fades, the village grows still. Doors close. Voices thin into distance. The inside of you can grow still too, not by pretending you are flawless, but by letting mercy be stronger than self-accusation. Your breathing can slow, even and unforced. The day does not need to be judged again tonight. And in the gentle words Jesus gave her, "Go in peace," you can find a place to rest, letting that peace stay near as your thoughts settle into sleep. The lake looks different when the day begins to cool. The glare softens, and the surface turns a deeper blue, holding the sky like a quiet mirror. Near the shore, small waves tap the stones with patient repetition. Luke tells in 8:22-25 that Jesus got into a boat with his disciples and said, "Let us go across to the other side of the lake." It sounds like an ordinary decision, leaving the edge of noise, choosing a stretch of open water, letting distance do its gentle work. The boat is plain, wood darkened by years, ropes that know many hands, a simple mast, oars set where they belong. The disciples step in with familiar movements. A line is untied. The hull eases away, and the shoreline becomes a softer outline, houses shrinking into small shapes. Jesus settles down as the crossing begins. Luke says he fell asleep. It is the kind of sleep that comes when a heart is not braced for disaster. His breathing becomes slow and even. In the same small boat where others stay alert, he rests as if safety is already decided. For a while, the lake cooperates. The air is cool and clean. The sail holds steady. Oars dip and rise in measured strokes. The only sounds are simple ones. Wood creaking, water sliding past the hull, the faint rustle of cloth. The disciples' shoulders begin to loosen. The crossing feels like the sort of quiet that can straighten a tired mind. Then the lake changes. A wind comes down from the hills, quick and strong. The surface tightens, darkening in patches. Waves begin to gather and stack, lifting the boat and letting it drop again. The shoreline feels farther away than it was a moment ago, and the water's voice grows louder. The disciples move fast, not for show, but because they know what needs doing. Hands find rope, feet brace, a sail is adjusted. Someone leans low to keep balance. Water splashes in, cold against skin, and the boat feels suddenly small. Wood surrounded by moving dark. If you know the feeling of sudden inner weather, you can understand them. One moment you are steady, and the next a thought arrives like wind down a narrow pass. Something you forgot, something you fear, something you cannot fix. The mind begins to toss, and it feels like you are taking on water. In the middle of it, Jesus is still sleeping. That detail is not meant to irritate you. It is meant to reveal something about him. His rest is not carelessness. It is calm that does not depend on the surface of the lake. The disciples go to him and wake him. Luke gives their words plainly. Master, Master, we are perishing. It is not polished prayer. It is honest fear spoken out loud. And there is mercy in the fact that they say it at all instead of swallowing it in silence. Jesus rises. He does not scramble. He stands with steady presence and speaks to the wind and the waves. Luke says he rebuked them, and they ceased. The lake becomes still. The change is immediate enough to feel impossible. The wind falls away. The waves settle into ripples. The boat, which had been pitching, steadies under their feet. The water that splashed in lies quiet on the boards, shining briefly before it soaks into cloth and fades. For a moment, no one speaks. They listen to the small sounds returning. A drop of water falling from a sleeve, the soft click of an oar against its pin, the gentle lap against the hull that now feels almost friendly. One disciple lets out a long breath he didn't realize he was holding. Another wipes his face and blinks at the dark horizon, as if seeing the lake for the first time. Then Jesus turns to them and asks, "Where is your faith?" It is not a cruel question. It is an invitation to remember, the next time the water rises, that faith is not pretending the storm is unreal. Faith is knowing who is in the boat with you. The disciples stare at him in a quiet kind of awe. Their voices drop low, as if the calm around them deserves respect. "Who then is this," they say, "that he commands even winds and water, and they obey him?" The question hangs in the clean air, and the lake continues to lie still, as if it is answering without words. The crossing goes on. Oars return to a calmer rhythm. The shoreline reappears as a dark line, then grows clearer. The night deepens, and the first stars show themselves, small, steady points that do not hurry. There is tenderness here for anyone who feels overwhelmed. This story does not promise that sudden winds will never come. It shows what to do when they do. Tell the truth, reach for help, and trust that calm can return. Sometimes calm returns by changing what happens around you. Sometimes it returns by changing what happens inside you. But Luke's telling offers one steady refuge. Jesus is not shaken by the storm, and his steadiness becomes a place where frightened hearts can slow down. You can let one gentle reflection settle into you. For most people, worry grows loudest when they try to control what cannot be controlled. Tonight, you do not have to hold the whole lake in your hands. You can loosen your grip. You can whisper your need without shame. You can trust that God does not scold you for waking him. He meets you. As the boat glides forward, the disciples do small, practical things. Wringing wet sleeves, shifting weight, checking the lines. Yet their movements are calmer now. They are not proving anything. They are simply continuing, one stroke at a time, under a sky that has returned to quiet. Then you can continue the same way. Let your breathing become even, like oars dipping into calm water, Slow in, slow out. Let the muscles in your face soften. Let your shoulders settle down and back. If a worry rises, you do not have to wrestle it. You can notice it and let it pass like a ripple that cannot become a wave. The boat keeps moving across the dark lake, supported by water that has returned to stillness. And your night can move the same way, carried, steady, safe enough to sleep. The day has been long enough to leave a soft heaviness behind the eyes. Dust clings to sandals, and voices have risen and fallen until even conversation feels tired. Luke tells in 9:10-17 that the apostles returned to Jesus and told him what they had done. He draws them away toward a quiet place near Bethsaida, not to hide them, but to give them a little room to breathe. The path out of town is more earth than stone, edged with scrub and open grass. The air smells of warm ground and crushed herbs, and the sky begins to deepen as the sun lowers. The disciples walk with a kind of tiredness that is not despair, only human. They have been giving themselves away in small ways all day, listening, helping, answering. A solitary place sounds like mercy, a few minutes with no one pulling at their sleeve. But people follow. They come in loose streams along the paths, drawn by need and by hope. Some carry worry like a bundle, some carry a child, some carry only their own restless thoughts and the desire to set them down somewhere safe. Jesus does not turn them away. Luke says he welcomed them, spoke about the kingdom of God, and healed those who needed healing. The hillside becomes a simple gathering. No walls, no ornaments, only grass underfoot and sky above. His voice is steady enough that even the open air feels like shelter. Hours pass. Shadows stretch longer across the ground. The wind cools, and the crowd's movement slows into quiet, shifting and settling. Children curl against parents. A few older men sit with hands on knees, eyes half closed, listening as if the words themselves are a kind of rest. The disciples notice the hour in the way bodies always do. Stomachs grow hollow. The nearest villages are not close, and the number of people is far beyond what a small group can manage. A practical worry forms, heavy and reasonable. How will all these people eat? They come to Jesus and speak plainly. Send the crowd away to find lodging and food, because they are in a deserted place. It is the kind of solution that protects what little strength the disciples have left. Jesus answers with a sentence that changes the shape of the evening. You give them something to eat. They look at what they have. It is almost nothing. 5 loaves and 2 fish. Small enough to fit in a satchel. Small enough to feel inadequate when you lift your eyes and see the hillside dotted with faces. Jesus does not scold their smallness. He tells them to have the people sit down in groups. So the crowd settles on the grass in calm clusters, as if the land itself is arranging them into quiet order. The noise of standing bodies fades. The hillside becomes still enough to hear a breeze combing through dry blades of grass. Then Jesus takes the loaves and the fish. Luke says he looks up to heaven, blesses them, and breaks them. His hands move without hurry. The blessing is not a performance. It is simple gratitude offered over ordinary food. The breaking is gentle, as if even hunger deserves tenderness. He gives the pieces to the disciples, and the disciples begin to walk among the groups. At first, it seems like it cannot possibly be enough. A portion is placed into one person's hands, then another's. A mother breaks her piece and shares it. A child accepts bread with both hands, careful and quiet. A man who expected to be forgotten finds himself included, and the food continues. The disciples return for more, and more is there. They keep moving, not frantically, but steadily, as if provision has a patient rhythm. Fish is shared too. Simple, salty, satisfying. The sharp edge of hunger begins to soften across the hillside. The tension that often sits in the shoulders of a crowd, waiting, wondering, bracing, eases as people realize they will be fed. Luke says they all ate and were satisfied. There is something deeply calming about that word. Satisfied does not mean everything in life is solved. It means, for this moment, the body can unclench. People chew slowly, talk softly, and breathe a little deeper. Faces relax. Children grow heavy-lidded. The evening becomes gentle. When the meal is finished, Jesus tells the disciples to gather what is left so nothing is wasted. They walk through the groups with baskets, collecting the remaining pieces with care. Luke says 12 baskets are filled. The number is quiet and surprising. More than they began with, more than the disciples would have dared to predict. The crowd begins to rise and drift away in small clusters. Footsteps soft on the cooling ground. The hillside feels cleansed, as if gratitude has moved through it like fresh air. The light continues to fade, and the world leans toward night. If you are listening tonight with a fear of not having enough time, enough strength, enough patience, this story meets that fear without mocking it. The disciples start with a truthful inventory. Jesus begins with what they actually have. In his hands, small becomes sufficient. One gentle reflection can rest beside you. Worry often multiplies when the mind tries to feed tomorrow with today's loaf. Tonight, you are not required to supply every future need before you sleep. You can bring what you have, however small it feels, and let God hold what you cannot stretch. Another comfort is this: the miracle does not come by denying hunger. It comes by meeting hunger with shared care and steady peace. Need is not a disgrace. It is simply part of being human. And Luke shows Jesus receiving human need with kindness. As the last voices fade, the disciples stand with their baskets and a new kind of quiet inside them. They are tired, yes, but softened, less clenched, less afraid. They have seen that provision can appear in a deserted place, and that nothing offered in faith is too small to place in Jesus' hands. And you too can let your evening be softened. Let the thought, "What if it isn't enough?" loosen its grip. The day has given what it gave, and now it is allowed to end. Let your shoulders sink, as if you have finally set down a load you were carrying too long. Let your breathing slow and deepen, easy and unforced, like grass cooling after sunset. And if your mind wanders, you can picture the calm groups on the hillside and the gentle hands breaking bread, simple, steady, enough. The Jericho road runs like a pale thread through rough land, where stones sit sharp and scrub bushes cling low to the ground. It is not a road made for lingering. It is made for getting from one place to another, quickly, with eyes open and steps sure. Luke tells in 10:25-37 that a lawyer stood up to test Jesus. The question sounds tidy, like something that can be answered and filed away. What must be done to inherit eternal life? Jesus draws him back to what he already knows. Love God with all your heart and love your neighbor as yourself. The words are familiar, but the man wants the edges clarified. Wanting to justify himself, Luke says, he asks, "And who is my neighbor?" It is the kind of question tired hearts ask when life feels unsafe. Where do I draw the line, and who must I carry? If the circle stays small, the cost stays small. If mercy stays managed, the heart feels protected. Jesus does not reply with a definition. He replies with a road. A man is traveling down from Jerusalem to Jericho. The day is bright enough to make the stones glare. Heat presses lightly on the shoulders. The traveler's sandals lift dust with each step, and the air tastes dry. He may be thinking about reaching the next shade, the next safe doorway before evening. Then trouble finds him in a place where help is not conveniently close. Luke says he falls among robbers. They strip him, beat him, and depart, leaving him half dead. The story does not linger on details. It simply tells you the truth. He is hurt, he is exposed, and he cannot get himself up. A priest comes down the road. You can imagine the faint sound of sandals on stone, the shift of a robe in the breeze. He sees the wounded man, close enough to understand. And yet Luke says he passes by on the other side. Then a Levite comes, another respected figure, another person who knows the sacred words. He also sees. He also passes by on the other side. Sometimes the mind calls this caution. Sometimes it calls it being busy. But for the man on the ground, it feels like being left alone, watching help become distance. Then Jesus introduces someone unexpected, a Samaritan, traveling. In that world, Samaritans and Jews carried long suspicion between them. The Samaritan is not the obvious hero. Yet Luke says that when he sees the man, he has compassion. Compassion is not a thought. It is a movement. The Samaritan goes to him. The road is dangerous, and stopping makes him vulnerable too. Still, he kneels. He looks closely. He does what can be done with the tools he has. He pours oil and wine on the wounds, simple, practical care, and binds them. He finds a little water for the man's mouth, not as a cure, but as a kindness. Oh, he does not ask the man to earn help by explaining himself. He gives what the moment requires. Then he lifts the man onto his own animal. That means the Samaritan will walk. It means his pace will slow. It means the journey will cost him more than a few minutes. He brings the injured man to an inn, a roadside shelter with low walls, straw underfoot, and lamplight that turns hard shadows soft. The innkeeper looks up, and the Samaritan speaks with the quiet urgency of someone protecting a life. He stays the night and takes care of him. The hours pass with small, steady attention. Water offered, a covering adjusted, a watch kept while the road outside grows silent. The lamp flickers once, then steadies, and the room keeps its gentle quiet. When the injured man stirs, the Samaritan does not rush him. He lets the room stay calm. In the morning, the Samaritan takes out 2 denarii. It is not a grand fortune, but it is real money, enough to matter. He gives it to the innkeeper and says, "Care for him, and if it costs more, I will repay you when I return." He ties his generosity to a promise. He makes the wounded man's future someone's concern. Jesus ends the story by returning to the lawyer's question. Which of these proved to be a neighbor to the man who fell among robbers? The answer is simple and unavoidable: the one who showed mercy. Jesus says, "Go and do likewise." The road remains the road, but the question has changed. Neighbor is not a category you label from a distance. Neighbor is the person you become when you choose mercy up close. For you, listening tonight, the comfort may be this: God's care is not limited to the people you expect. Help can arrive from directions you did not predict. Mercy can cross lines. It can step into unsafe places and bring a small shelter with it. And there is another gentler truth. You do not always have to be the strong one. Sometimes you are the person on the ground, tired from the day, unable to carry yourself any farther. In that case, receiving mercy is not failure. It is how God reminds you that you are worth stopping for. The inn in Jesus' story is not a palace. It is plain, practical, and sufficient. A clay jug of water. A lamp that does not burn bright, only steady. Yet for a hurting traveler, that sufficiency becomes sanctuary. Let that image settle into your evening. A safe place that is not perfect, but real. A light that does not shout, but stays. Care given without interrogation. And when tomorrow comes, mercy can begin with ordinary steps. Attention, patience, a willingness to slow down for someone's need. As the Jericho road fades from view, imagine the wounded man breathing a little easier under a simple covering. Imagine the inn's doorway shut against the night wind. And inside that quiet steadiness, let your own breathing slow, easy and unforced, until rest can find you too. A village house sits just off the main path, tucked behind a low wall where vines curl and leaves gather dust. The late light comes in soft, slanting angles, touching a clay jug near the doorway and the worn edges of stone steps that have known many feet. Luke tells in 10:38-42 that as Jesus and his disciples went on their way, he entered a village, and a woman named Martha welcomed him into her house. The word welcomed feels like the first warm thing in the story. An open door, a place to sit, a bowl set down with care. Hospitality is not a theory here. It is bread and water and space. Inside, the air smells faintly of flour, oil, and wood smoke from a small cooking fire. The room is not large, but it is alive with purposeful movement. Martha steps quickly, hands busy, eyes scanning what still needs doing. A jar needs refilling, cups need rinsing, a dish needs more herbs. The bread should be warmed. Guests should be comfortable. Martha does not love Jesus less because she works. She loves him in the language she knows, making the house ready, making the table generous, making sure nothing feels awkward or lacking. Her care is real and it is beautiful. But care can become heavy when it carries the weight of proving something. Mary, her sister, chooses a different posture. Luke says she sat at the Lord's feet and listened to his teaching. She's not lounging in indifference. She is receiving. She has placed her body close enough to hear without strain, close enough to let his words enter her heart the way warm light enters a room. You can picture her stillness, hands resting loosely in her lap, shoulders relaxed, breath unhurried, her eyes attentive, not hungry for argument, only for peace. In a world where many women are expected to move constantly, Mary sits and listens as if sitting is allowed. Jesus speaks with the calm steadiness you have heard in other scenes. The disciples listen too, their own tiredness softened by the simple fact of being welcomed indoors. Outside, the village sounds continue. Distant voices, a dog's bark, a cartwheel turning somewhere down the lane. But inside, the house becomes a pocket of quiet. Martha keeps moving. The more she moves, the more she notices what is not being done. She sees Mary sitting. She hears laughter from the room. She hears the low murmur of teaching. And inside her, a familiar pressure rises. I am doing this alone. That pressure is one many people recognize. When you carry a household, a job, a family, a schedule, it can feel like your work is invisible until you stop doing it. And if you stop, everything falls apart. So you keep going, and the going begins to scrape your soul. Luke says Martha was distracted with much serving. Distracted is a gentle word, but it holds a real ache. Her attention is pulled in too many directions at once. She is present with her body, but not at rest in her spirit. Finally, she comes to Jesus and speaks, not with cruelty, but with weary honesty. "Lord, do you not care that my sister has left me to serve alone? Tell her then to help me." It is a vulnerable moment. Martha is not only asking for assistance, she's asking to be seen. She's asking for her effort to matter. She's asking someone she trusts to hold the imbalance for a moment. Jesus answers in a way that is both tender and clarifying. He speaks her name twice. Martha, Martha. In Scripture, repeating a name often sounds like affection, like a hand placed gently on a shoulder. He does not call her foolish. He does not shame her for serving. He tells the truth about what serving has done to her. "You are anxious and troubled about many things." Many things. The phrase feels like a soft summary of so many lives. Then he says, "One thing is necessary. Mary has chosen the good portion, which will not be taken away from her." He is not saying that food does not matter. He is not saying that hospitality is unholy. He is saying that there is a kind of attention more nourishing than bread. There is a portion that feeds the heart. And when you choose it, you are not being selfish. You are being wise. For you listening tonight, the story offers a gentle permission. You do not have to prove your love by exhausting yourself. Love can be steady without being frantic. You can set down a few many things for the sake of the one thing that restores you. The house remains the same house. The fire still warms the air. The cups still need filling. But the atmosphere shifts when Jesus speaks. You can imagine Martha pausing, just pausing, letting the truth land. You can imagine her breath catching, then softening. She may still finish the meal, but perhaps with a different spirit, less braced, less alone. And Mary remains at Jesus' feet, not smug, only quiet. The good portion is not about winning. It is about receiving what cannot be taken. Peace, presence, the gentle steadiness of being with the Lord. This is the difference the story offers. The difference between a busy room and a peaceful heart. The difference between doing and being. The difference between carrying everything and letting yourself be carried for a while. As the evening deepens, lamplight grows warmer. Shadows soften along the walls. The village outside settles into night. Inside, the house becomes quieter, as if even the air is listening. You can take that posture now, not necessarily by changing anything in your life tonight, but by changing your inner stance. You can be Mary for a moment, simply listening, simply receiving, letting the good portion feed you. Let your shoulders drop as if you have stepped away from the kitchen for a breath. Let your hands rest without clenching. Let your breath move slow and steady. The many things can wait outside the doorway of this moment. And in this moment, you are allowed to rest near Jesus, safe in his presence, choosing what will not be taken away. The hillside is open to the breeze, which brushes the grass and carries the faint scent of wild herbs. Far below, the lake holds the last light like a smooth bowl of blue. Roads curve away toward villages, where lamps will soon glow behind shutters. Luke tells in 12:22-34 that Jesus speaks to his disciples about worry. It is the kind of teaching that fits the evening. When the mind reviews the day and predicts tomorrow, when a person can lie down and still feel as if the heart is standing up, Jesus does not pretend that people have no needs. He names the ordinary concerns of every household. Food to keep the body strong, clothing to keep the night air from biting. Yet he also speaks of a heavier thing, an anxious striving that tightens the chest and steals the sweetness from the simplest bread. The listeners sit in quiet clusters. Some have worked since sunrise. A child leans against a parent's side, already soothed by the steady sound of Jesus' voice. The sky above them grows softer as the sun lowers. Jesus says not to be anxious about life, about what to eat or what to wear. Not because hunger is nothing, but because worry cannot do what it promises. Luke keeps it plain. Which of them, by being anxious, can add a single hour to their span of life? The question lands gently, like a small stone dropped into still water. There is relief in admitting what worry cannot do. It cannot lengthen your life. It cannot rewrite what already happened today. It cannot force tomorrow to behave. So Jesus guides their attention elsewhere. Birds pass overhead, small shapes gliding on the evening air. They are not gathering grain into barns, yet they live day after day, fed by a world God sustains. Jesus speaks of ravens, plain creatures, not celebrated, yet still provided for. If care reaches even what people overlook, then God has not forgotten the ones who are tired and trying. Then Jesus turns the gaze downward, toward the slope where wildflowers grow in scattered patches. They do not labor at looms. They do not lose sleep over thread. Yet they are clothed with beauty that outshines the richest robes. Jesus mentions Solomon, and the comparison is almost tender, as if to say that the Father's care is not merely functional, it is generous. The breeze moves again, and the blossoms tremble without falling. The grass leans and rises. The land itself seems to agree with the teaching. Life is being held. Jesus speaks of grass that is here today and gone tomorrow, and even that does not feel neglected. If the Father attends to what is brief, how much more will he attend to people? Breathing, listening, longing for peace. In the crowd, worries are not all the same. One person thinks of a pantry that looks too empty. Another thinks of taxes, or a debt, or a demand that will arrive like a heavy knock on the door. Worry always tries to make the world feel smaller and harsher than it truly is. Jesus says the Father knows what they need. There is comfort in that knowledge. It means you are not the only one watching the horizon. The Father is already aware, already near. Then Jesus offers a different direction for the heart. Seek God's kingdom. In his words, that kingdom is a way of living under God's care, where mercy is stronger than fear. These things will be added, Luke records, not as a bargain, but as a promise that the Father's care is real. And then Jesus speaks a phrase that sounds like warmth. Do not be afraid, little flock. He does not flatter them into feeling powerful. He names their smallness and still calls them safe. Luke says it is the Father's good pleasure to give them the kingdom. Gladness, not reluctance. Jesus continues, speaking about treasure, about where the heart stores what it loves. He talks of treasure that cannot be stolen and does not decay. Where your treasure is, Luke says, there will your heart be also. A heart that stores itself in worry becomes restless. A heart that stores itself in God begins to settle. Some in the crowd hear the word treasure and think of coins tucked into a sash, of savings hidden in a jar, of the quiet fear that thieves might come in the night. Others think of different treasures: reputation, control, the feeling of being prepared for every possible trouble. Jesus' words reach all of it. He is inviting them to place their deepest security where it cannot be worn thin by time. He is offering a safer storehouse than anxious planning, a steadier shelter than endless what-if. When the heart knows where it belongs, it can unclench, like fingers relaxing after a long grip. A person can still be wise, still prepare, still work with care, yet without living as if everything depends on their vigilance. The Father's pleasure and the kingdom's gift become a quiet anchor, and the soul stops drifting in circles. The evening air cools a little. Someone shifts on the ground and finds a more comfortable position. The lake below looks calmer now, and the sky deepens. A few early stars appearing like quiet assurances. It is easy to imagine the listeners rising afterward and walking home with a softer step. Not because every need vanished, but because the inner pressure eased. They came carrying what if, and they leave carrying something steadier. The sense that they are noticed, the sense that they are held. And you can let that steadiness come close to you now. The day has been what it has been. Tomorrow can wait at the edge of the road. Tonight is allowed to be simple. Let the image of birds gliding without strain and wildflowers standing without worry rest in the background of your thoughts. Let the words "little flock" settle like a gentle covering. Breath can slow, easy, and natural, as if the body remembers it is safe enough to rest. And you can drift toward sleep with a quiet sense that you are seen, you are cared for, and you do not have to carry tomorrow on your back tonight. Beyond the last houses, the land opens into low hills where paths thread between stones and scrub, and the night air carries a faint scent of sheep and dry grass. A thin moon hangs above, not bright enough to erase shadows, only bright enough to guide a careful step. As Luke tells in 15:17, people with stained reputations were drawing near to hear Jesus, and others murmured that he welcomed them. Jesus answered with a story that begins with counting, steady, ordinary care. A shepherd counts his flock before the dark thickens. The sheep shift in a slow, drowsy way, bodies pressing close. A bell gives a small chime when one turns. The shepherd's fingers move along familiar backs, and his lips form the numbers almost under his breath. He counts again. Something is missing. At first he tries to believe it is only hidden. One head lowered, one body tucked behind another. He steps to the side and counts once more. The number does not return. The absence becomes clear, like a sudden quiet where a sound should be. He guides the 99 toward a safer place, stones piled into a rough fold, a sheltered dip in the hillside, a spot the flock has learned to trust. The sheep settle with little complaint. They know his voice. They know the way he stands at the edge and listens. Then he turns away from them and walks into the open hills. His staff taps stone now and then. He calls softly, not shouting, letting the sound travel. He pauses to listen. The land answers with small night noises, a rustle in brush, a distant bird, the wind moving over dry grass. He keeps going, steady and patient, searching the places a sheep might drift, around a bend, behind a rise, into a shallow ravine where the air turns cool. Wandering does not always begin with rebellion. Sometimes it begins with distraction, sometimes with hunger, sometimes with a simple pull toward what looks greener just a little farther on. And then the light fades, and the familiar path is suddenly hard to find. Jesus' story does not linger on why the sheep wandered. The focus is on the shepherd, how he searches until he finds it. At last, a thin bleat lifts into the night, uncertain and brief. The shepherd turns toward it. He follows the sound, calling back in a low tone, letting the lost one hear that it is not alone. He pushes aside a branch that catches at his sleeve and steps down over loose stones, careful not to startle the frightened animal. There, in the shadow of a rock, the sheep stands trembling, ears twitching, eyes wide, body angled as if ready to bolt, but unsure where safety is. A thorn may be caught in its wool. Its legs may be tired from scrambling. It is not dramatic. It is simply vulnerable. The shepherd does not scold it into calm. He comes close and rests a steady hand on its neck. He frees the snag gently. Then he lifts the sheep onto his shoulders, shifting the weight until it is secure. Wool brushes his cheek. Warmth spreads through his cloak. The walk back is slower, but it is sure. His breathing finds a rhythm. The narrow path feels less hostile when he is carrying what matters. When he reaches the fold, the flock stirs, then settles again as they sense him. He lowers the sheep and watches it press back into the group as if it has always belonged there. Only then does the shepherd let himself smile. He checks the fold stones once more, makes sure the opening is guarded, and turns toward the village, where a few lamps still burn low. At a doorway, a neighbor looks up at the sound of steps. The shepherd does not give a long explanation. He simply says what his heart has been holding. The lost one is found. Relief passes from face to face, the way warmth passes from one hand to another. Then Jesus says, the shepherd calls friends and neighbors and says, "Rejoice with me, for I have found my sheep that was lost." The joy is not sharp excitement. It is gratitude. It is the steady gladness of what was missing being restored. Jesus makes the meaning plain. There is joy in heaven over one person who turns back. Not annoyance, not cold tolerance, joy. You can picture the listeners around Jesus when he says this. People who have been pushed to the edges. People who have learned to keep their eyes down when the righteous walk by. Some of them may feel like a missing number in someone else's count, always noticed only when they fail. And yet Jesus sets his story on their side of the road, as if to say, the shepherd's attention does not drift. He notices absence. He moves toward it. It is a gentle truth for anyone who feels counted only by mistakes. In God's care, you are counted as someone worth searching for. Your name is not a rumor passed around a table. You are not a problem to be managed. You are someone the shepherd goes after, even when the hills are dark and the path is narrow. And when you find your way home, however slowly, your return is not met with clenched fists, but with open hands. The hills fade in your imagination. The fold becomes a small circle of quiet breathing. The night wind softens. Somewhere nearby, a lamp could be lit, just enough to show the edge of a doorway and the shape of rest. And you can rest too, with the simple knowledge that you are not overlooked. Let your breathing slow as if the search is over. Let your shoulders unclench as if the weight of proving yourself has been set down. The way back to peace does not have to be loud. It can be as quiet as a shepherd's steady steps under a thin moon. In that quiet, even your thoughts can grow softer at the edges, turning less urgent, more distant. The night can hold you gently, and sleep can come the way homecoming comes, slow, certain, and safe. The country road is narrow and pale in the late light, worn smooth by carts and years of footsteps. On either side, fields rest after the day's labor. The air smells of dry earth cooling down, and somewhere in the distance birds settle into the trees as if the evening has quietly called them home. As Luke tells in 15:11-32, a man once had 2 sons. The younger one asked for his share of the inheritance. He wanted the gifts without the waiting, the future in his hands, right away. The father did not argue him into staying. He divided what he had, and the younger son gathered his portion and left for a far country. At first, distance feels like freedom. The young man spends quickly, tasting choices with no one correcting him, no one expecting him at the gate. But money does not last when it is poured out without measure. Then a famine comes, and the land tightens like a clenched fist. Work becomes scarce. Food becomes harder. The young man finds himself alone with hunger and the quiet embarrassment of needing help. Luke says he hires himself out and is sent into the fields to feed pigs. The work is simple, steady, and humiliating. He watches the animals eat and realizes his own stomach is empty. No one gives him what he needs. The far country does not have a soft place to land. And then, in that low place, memory rises like a small lamp. He remembers his father's house, where even hired servants have bread enough and to spare. He comes to himself, Luke says, as if waking from a long, restless dream. He forms a confession that is plain and honest. Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. He does not build excuses. He only longs to return, even if it means returning in the lowest place. So he starts walking. The road back is long enough for shame to speak and for hope to answer. Dust clings to his ankles. Some nights he sleeps under open sky, pulling his thin cloak close, listening to the wind pass through dry grass. In the morning, he wakes with stiff muscles and a steady decision. One more mile, one more bend in the road. He repeats his confession as he walks, not to impress anyone, but to keep his heart from running back into pride. In time, the Father's house appears, first as a shape on the horizon, then as familiar lines. A low wall, a gate, a cluster of trees. The young man slows, as if his legs are no longer sure they deserve to cross the boundary. His hands feel too empty, his clothes too worn, his story too heavy. But the Father has been watching. Luke says that while the son was still a long way off, his father saw him and felt compassion. The father runs. He does not wait on the porch to make a point. Love moves first. The robe lifts with his stride. The distance between them closes quickly, like a shadow shrinking in the last light. He reaches his son and embraces him. For a moment, the road disappears. There's only the sound of breathing, close and real, and the weight of arms that do not push away. The son begins his confession, voice thin with trembling. Father, I have sinned. He tries to offer his plan to become a servant, but the father answers with actions that speak louder than the son's fear. He calls for the best robe. Someone brings it, and it settles over the son's shoulders like warmth returning. He calls for a ring, and it slides onto the son's hand, a quiet sign that says, "You belong here." He calls for sandals, because this home is not asking the son to crawl in on bare feet. Each gift is simple, physical mercy. Then the father speaks the truth into the courtyard. His son was lost and is found. The household hears it. Servant move with gentle speed. Lamps are lit. Bread is prepared. A meal becomes more than a meal. It becomes a welcome. The courtyard fills with soft light, and even the stone underfoot seems kinder. Later, the older son comes in from the field and hears music. He asks what it means, and anger rises when he learns his brother has returned. He stands outside, stiff with years of unseen effort. The father goes out to him too. Again, love moves toward the one who is not at peace. The older son speaks his hurt plainly. He is served and still feels overlooked. The father answers with steadiness, "Son, you are always with me, and all that is mine is yours." He does not deny the older son's faithfulness. He simply refuses to let faithfulness become a wall against mercy. It was fitting to celebrate, he says, because the lost has returned. Luke leaves the ending open, as if the story is still walking toward your own heart. Maybe you carry the younger son's ache, regret in the fear that you have gone too far. Or maybe you carry the older son's fatigue, trying to do right, yet quietly wondering if anyone notices. In either case, this story places a father on the road, watching, moving, welcoming. Compassion does not wait for you to be polished. Compassion comes to meet you. For most people, rest becomes possible when the inner argument softens. When you stop punishing yourself with endless replay and stop measuring love like a wage. Tonight, you can let that measuring loosen. You can be held without having to prove you deserve it. The courtyard lights soften as the night deepens. The road, once full of wandering steps, grows quiet again. In your imagination, the Father's hands, once lifted in an embrace, are at rest, and you can rest too. Let your breathing become slow and easy, as if you have finally reached a safe doorway. Let your shoulders relax, as if a long journey has ended. If any regret or worry tries to follow you into the night, picture the Father running down the road, placing a robe gently over trembling shoulders, and calling you home without hesitation. The road bends near a cluster of trees, where shade arrives like mercy. A thin stream makes a quiet sound over stones, and the air carries dry grass mixed with the sweetness of crushed figs. Travelers slow here without being told. Families settle their bundles and let their feet rest before the next stretch. As Luke tells in 18:15-17, people were bringing even infants to Jesus, hoping he would touch them. Mothers hold babies against their shoulders. Fathers guide toddlers who sway with the tiredness of the day, small hands dusty, eyes curious. Jesus is there among his disciples, and the crowd gathers the way crowds do. Quietly at first, then with more bodies than space. The disciples try to manage it. They are not cruel. They are protective. Adults with questions lean forward. People with long stories wait their turn. The disciples begin to wave the families back, as if children are an interruption to important work. But the children are not trying to be important. They are simply present. One baby reaches toward the light on a water jar. A toddler crouches to pick up a smooth pebble and turns it in his palm as if it is treasure. Another child watches the folds of Jesus' robe and smiles. Not because she understands, but because something about him feels safe. The parents hesitate when the disciples push them away. Some step back, embarrassed, as if they misread the moment. A mother adjusts her shawl and turns her baby inward, trying to leave without trouble. A little boy's face falls, and he clings to his father's leg, the way children do when the world suddenly feels too large. That is when Jesus speaks, and the tone of the stopping place changes. Luke says he calls the children to him and will not let them be kept away. His words are not loud, but they carry. He welcomes the small ones as if they belong at the center, not at the edge. The disciples stop their motion. Their hands lower. Their faces change, and a quiet humility settles in. They meant to guard the moment, but they nearly guarded it away from the very kind of people the kingdom is meant to embrace. The children come forward, not marching like adults, but drifting in their own honest way. A little girl steps carefully over a root and then forgets to be careful because she sees Jesus' open hands. A boy who was shy a moment ago suddenly finds his courage and edges closer. Jesus bends down so he's not towering over them. He makes his height gentle. A baby is passed into his arms, and the baby quiets, as if recognizing peace by instinct. Jesus' hands are steady, not hurried. He touches a child's head with a simple tenderness, the kind of touch that says, "You are safe here." The parents watch, their shoulders loosening. Some have lived under hard eyes, where worth is measured by usefulness or status. In this moment, they see a different measure. Smallness is not a problem to be managed. Smallness is welcome. One mother's breath releases in a long exhale, as if she's been bracing for years. A father rubs his child's dusty cheek with his thumb and smiles, surprised by how light the moment feels. One infant falls asleep against Jesus' arm, mouth relaxed, fists unclenched. The disciples, standing nearby, begin to help instead of block, offering a cup of water, clearing a little space, learning that reverence can look like making room. Jesus says that the kingdom of God belongs to such as these. He speaks of receiving the kingdom like a child. The kingdom is not received through cleverness or control. It is received through trust, through open hands, through the simple willingness to be held. A child does not demand guarantees about tomorrow's weather. A child drinks water when offered. A child rests when sleep comes. A child believes love when love is shown. There is wisdom in that simplicity, and Jesus places it in the middle of the disciples' busy world. One small boy reaches up and touches Jesus' sleeve, then pulls his hand back, half astonished that he was allowed. Jesus smiles, and the boy's shoulders drop, as if permission has entered his bones. Another child leans against a parent's knee, eyelids heavy, listening without effort. The disciples watch this, and perhaps they feel a quiet correction. They have seen people try to earn attention with loudness. Here, they see the opposite. Attention given freely to those who do not know how to compete for it. If you have been living as if you must prove you deserve rest, this scene offers a softer way. You may not need perfect words ready. You can come as you are, tired, small in your own eyes, carrying only what you can carry, and still be welcomed close. The shade grows longer. The stopping place feels like a small sanctuary on the way. A moment where the world's speed slows down because love chooses to linger. In time, the road will continue, but something remains. The kingdom, Jesus says, is received without clenched fists, without bargaining, without fear of being turned away. You can let that truth settle into you tonight. You do not have to keep your heart braced like a guard at a gate. You can loosen. You can receive. You can let God's care come close enough to touch the places that feel young inside you. Your longing, your weariness, your need to be safe. When the families finally rise, it is with quieter steps than before. Babies are gathered back into arms. Toddlers are lifted onto hips. A few parents glance back once, as if they want to carry the gentleness in their eyes for the rest of the road. The stream's thin sound grows softer in the imagination. Leaves overhead quiet. The road's dust settles back to the ground. And as the scene dims, your mind can grow less busy, like a room after children have finally drifted off. there's no need to hold yourself rigidly awake. In the gentle hush of being welcomed, rest can arrive on its own, unhurried, and stay. Jericho is warm, the kind of town where palms lift their fronds into the light, and the air carries a faint sweetness from fruit laid out in the markets. The road that passes through it stays busy with steady footsteps and quiet bargaining voices. As Luke tells in 19:110, Jesus enters Jericho and is passing through. Passing through means the moment could slip away, one turn of the road, and he is gone. Zacchaeus refuses to let it slip. He is a chief tax collector, and he is rich. In Jericho, those words bring a certain chill. People know who takes and who must pay. They know which hands count coins and which hands come home empty. Zacchaeus has position, yet position does not buy affection. It often buys distance. Polite nods that end quickly, conversations that stop when he steps near. He wants to see who Jesus is, but the crowd is thick and Zacchaeus is short. Shoulders block his view. Every time he tries to edge closer, someone steps forward, and the gap closes again. He stops, and you can almost feel the familiar sting of being kept at the edge. As if his size has become a symbol the town enjoys repeating back to him. Then he does something surprising for a man with an important title. He runs ahead along the roadside, gathers his robe so he won't trip, and heads for a sycamore tree with broad branches stretching over the way. He climbs quickly, hands on bark, sandals scraping, until he finds a strong limb where leaves can hide him. Up there he is quiet, watching, breathing, letting the tree hold his weight the way the street never seems to. From that height, the road looks like a moving cloth of faces and dust. And then Jesus comes into view, walking calmly, not pushed by the crowd, not performing for it. Zacchaeus leans forward, careful, trying to stay unseen, telling himself he only wants one honest look. But Jesus stops beneath the tree. The street's movement slows. A hush gathers, not forced, simply startled. Jesus looks up, and his gaze finds Zacchaeus through the leaves, as if nothing can keep him hidden. He speaks his name. Zacchaeus. It is a different kind of being seen. Many have looked at him and seen only what they resent. Many have spoken about him without ever speaking to him. Yet Jesus names him as a person, not a rumor. And the sound of that name feels like a doorway opening in a wall he thought was solid. Then Jesus says, "Hurry and come down, for I must stay at your house today." Today, not later, when Zacchaeus has cleaned up his story. Not after he has convinced the town he is worth tolerating. Today, while he is still perched in the branches, half embarrassed, half hopeful. Zacchaeus climbs down fast, nearly slipping in his haste. His feet hit the ground, and he stands blinking at the road as if the air has changed. He welcomes Jesus with joy that feels more like relief than celebration, like a tight knot in the chest finally loosening. The crowd murmurs. Luke says they grumble that Jesus has gone in to be the guest of a sinner. Their words carry the old instinct to keep mercy tidy, to keep the wrong kind of person at a safe distance. A few faces harden, and a few simply look confused, as if kindness has shown up in a shape they didn't expect. But Jesus walks with Zacchaeus anyway. They enter Zacchaeus' home, and the street noise dims behind the doorway. Shade settles, water is poured, bread is brought. The house becomes a calmer space than Zacchaeus has likely known in a long time. Not because the room is grand, but because welcome has arrived inside it. For once, he is not negotiating, not calculating, not bracing for the next accusation. He is simply hosting, listening, letting the moment be real, Zacchaeus stands, as if he needs to speak while courage is still warm in his chest. He says he will give half his goods to the poor, and if he has defrauded anyone, he will restore it fourfold. Behind the words, you can almost see faces in his mind. Names he avoided, doors he passed, moments he justified. This does not sound like bargaining. It sounds like a heart finally stepping into the light. When a person is met by undeserved kindness, the inner knots can loosen, and a new honesty can begin. Jesus answers with a sentence that changes the atmosphere of the whole house. Today salvation has come to this house. And he speaks of his purpose, to seek and to save the lost. Lost in this story is not a slap. It is a word spoken with compassion, the way a shepherd speaks of a sheep he intends to bring home. If you are listening tonight with parts of your life you try to keep hidden, behind habits, behind busyness, behind careful distance, Zacchaeus offers a gentle hope. You may feel safer watching from the branches, observing faith without letting it touch the places that sting. Yet this story says Jesus can still stop under your tree. He can still call your name. He can still choose today. And that choice may begin, quietly, to change what you believe about yourself. Outside, Jericho's light begins to fade. Shadows stretch along the road. The market voice is quiet. Inside, a lamp glows warmer, and the room holds a steadier calm than it did before. As the scene dims in your imagination, the sycamore leaves become a soft canopy, and the crowd's murmurs drift far away. What remains is the quiet fact of being seen and still welcomed. And in that welcome, your own night can ease. Thoughts can slow, like footsteps finally leaving the road. Breath can deepen without effort. The body can grow heavy in the safest way, as if a long, watchful day has ended, and the door has been closed softly against the dark. Evening settles over the road to Emmaus, cooling the stones beneath tired feet. A mild breeze carries the scent of olives and dry grass. The sky deepens from pale gold to blue, and the land grows quieter without making a fuss. As Luke tells in 24:13-35, two disciples walk this road together. Their pace is steady, but their thoughts are not. Hope had seemed close until it suddenly wasn't. And now even the facts feel strange. Like familiar objects moved from their usual place. They had been in Jerusalem. They had watched what happened to Jesus of Nazareth. They had listened to promises with their whole hearts. And then they had watched those hearts bruise. Today, there were new reports that did not settle anything. Women who went to the tomb at dawn, an empty place where a body should have been, messengers speaking words that sounded impossible. Some friends had run to see and found it just as the women said. Still, no one had seen Jesus with their own eyes. So the two keep talking as they walk, turning the same details over and over, searching for a place to set their hope down without breaking it. While they are speaking, a third traveler draws near and begins walking with them. His steps match theirs, unhurried. He asks what they are discussing, and the question is so ordinary, it almost feels like mercy. They stop, surprised that anyone could be unaware. One answers with weary honesty. Is this traveler the only person who does not know what has happened? The stranger asks what things, and they tell him. They speak of Jesus' life and power, of how they believed he would redeem Israel, of how the leaders turned against him, and how the end came in a way they did not understand. They do not linger on distressing detail. They simply name the sorrow and the confusion. Then they add the part that has unsettled them most. The morning's news, the empty tomb, the message of life, the absence of a sight that would have calmed everything at once. Their words come out in a careful rush, truthful but still not whole. The stranger listens, and then he speaks with gentle clarity. His voice does not scold them for hurting. He begins to open the scriptures, slowly tracing God's promises from long ago. He shows how suffering and glory are not strangers, how the Holy One's path was spoken of before their own lives began. He does not force them to agree. He invites their minds to breathe, to see a larger story sturdy enough to hold their smaller story. As they continue walking, the road does not change, yet something inside them does. The questions remain, but they no longer feel like a swarm. The stranger's words give the questions shape and order. The two disciples find themselves listening more than arguing. Their shoulders loosen by degrees, as if a tight knot has been gently released. The light fades further. A lamp appears ahead, warm and small, marking a home or an inn near the village. When they draw near to Emmaus, the stranger acts as though he will go on. Night has gathered in the low places, and the road ahead looks darker. The two do not want the conversation to end. They urge him to stay. The evening has come, and the day is nearly over. It is a simple invitation, but it carries a deep human need. Stay with us while it is dark. So he goes in with them. Inside, the room is plain, but welcoming. A clay lamp glows, turning shadows soft. The smell of bread and a small cooking fire hangs in the air. Water is poured. Hands are washed. A quiet meal begins with no speeches, only the steady comfort of being indoors when the night settles outside. Then, as Luke tells it, the traveler takes bread, blesses it, breaks it, and gives it to them. In that small action, recognition arrives like warmth. Their eyes are opened, and they know who has been walking beside them. The gesture is familiar, gentle, sure, like something their hearts have missed more than their minds could explain. And then he is gone from their sight. For a moment, the two sit very still. The lamp flame flickers and steadies again. The house is quiet, but the quiet is different now, alive with meaning. They look at each other and speak softly. Were our hearts not burning within us while he talked with us on the road and opened the scriptures? The question is not a shout. It is a trembling recognition that hope had been present before they dared to name it. Outside, it is fully night. The road back to Jerusalem is long and dark, yet they rise. They are not driven by panic. They are pulled by good news that must be shared. They return with careful speed to the others, and they tell what happened, how the Lord has risen, and how he was known to them in the breaking of the bread. Luke leaves you here, with friends gathered in lamplight, sharing testimony that sounds like breath returning after a long hold. No one is asked to pretend the grief never existed. Yet hope re-enters the room, quietly, like dawn arriving without noise. For you listening tonight, the Emmaus Road offers a calm comfort. You are not required to understand everything before peace can touch you. Sometimes peace comes while you are still speaking your questions out loud. Sometimes it comes through companionship, someone keeping pace with you when you thought you were walking alone. And sometimes recognition comes in an ordinary gift. Bread broken, kindness offered, light held steady in a simple room. Let that lamp grow softer in your imagination until it is only a warm glow. Let the road grow quiet again. Your thoughts do not need to run ahead tonight. They can slow, one by one. Your breathing can become steady and easy, like a room settling after the door is gently closed. And in the hush of being accompanied, you can rest, trusting that even on roads you do not fully understand, you are not walking alone. The lamps in the house have grown low, and the last voices fade into a gentle hush. In that quiet, gratitude rises like warm breath and cool air. Gratitude for the scriptures that steady the mind, for the Savior who draws near on weary roads, and for the simple mercies of one more night safely received. Lord Jesus, you who walked beside the troubled and spoke peace into their questions, let your nearness rest over every listener now. Let the heart that has been racing find a slower rhythm. Let the mind that has been circling return to still waters. Where there has been heaviness, lay down a soft assurance. Where there has been loneliness, set a quiet companionship that does not leave when the lights go out. Father in heaven, you know each need before it is spoken. Hold every home under your care. Bless the rooms where someone is trying to sleep, the beds where bodies ache, the corners where worries have gathered. Cover them with calm, not as a fragile feeling, but as a steady gift. And if grief lingers, let it be met with tenderness. If hope feels small, let it be guarded like a lamp against the wind. And as the night deepens, let the story of Emmaus linger like warm bread in the hands. A reminder that you are recognized in quiet gifts, and that you remain close even when you are not seen. Let faith be simple, like an open palm. Let love be steady like a small light held in the dark. Let every resting heart be kept until dawn. May your peace settle into the breath, gentle and unforced. May forgiveness feel close, like a door softly closed against the night. May tomorrow wait without pressing in, and may sleep come as your kindness, quiet, restoring, and safe, until morning arrives in its own time. Amen.